So when Max Allegri became the coach of Milan, it became clear that three things would happen with the club. One would be a higher focus on the defensive side of the game. Two would be an attempt to blend experience with youth. And third would be a push to Italianize the club. And if you look at the first official signing of Milan's transfer window in Samuele Ricci, you can clearly tell that the player checks off all three boxes. Now, which of these other profiles could join the club, we'll take a look at in today's episode of Rumor or Real. And once again, back for this episode, we have Vito's voice. Vito Angele, who's the editorial director of MilanReports.com and also works as an opinionist on Italian TV for Sport Italia, will provide us with some direct reporting as to how some of these profiles and their potential moves to Milan are actually progressing. So let's kick things off with the first profile of Ardon Jashari and see what Vito has to say about this.
The situation of Jashari now is in standby because AC Milan have once again improved their offer. The midfielder wants to leave and his club now it. Milan think now that the latest offer of around 35 million euros is enough because Jashari was paid 6 million only a year ago, so his club would get a big profit.
So that's the amount that seems like Milan is set on. They don't really want to go beyond a 35 million euro fixed price. Now, could they potentially add something in bonuses? Some journalists are hinting. Luca Marinetti came out and said that, Milan is just in the process of now negotiating with Club Brugge as to what the add-ons are going to look like. It could be add-ons that push the total transfer value to somewhere around that 35 to 38 million euro mark. And credit to another Italian journalist, and Luca Bianchi, who was one of the first ones to come out and said that, hey, Club Brugge might evaluate their player at between 45 to 50 million euros, but a deal around that 40 million euro mark can be achieved. There were some reports that came out that, especially when it was reported that Iglitare went to Belgium to negotiate and he was hushed away and said, hey, go back. We're not even in the mood to sell the player. He's part of our plans. If you pay 50 to 60 million euros, that's when we're going to let him go. It seems to me like that reporting that came out of Belgium was not true. 50 to 60 million was never the realistic price point for this player. It always seemed like that value quoted by Luca Bianchi around 40 million euros is what the value of the player was. And as Vito now reports, 35 million fixed is where Milan wants to stay. If they go above that, it's going to have to be in add-ons, no more addition in terms of the fixed value of the player. The player has also found an agreement with Milan on a 5-year contract. It said that his salary is somewhere around that 2.8 million euro mark. And, some people were drawing the conclusion or the similarity to the Charles de Ketelaere deal, who also signed a 5-year contract at 3 million euros per season. So salary-wise, price-wise, this player is very similar to CDK, but you really hope that outcome-wise, this will be a lot more different. I think it was important to point out that the way that De Ketelaere was even played by Stefano Pioli at times was questionable. He never really fit into the club, and he also came with a significantly different type of pressure that was brought about. Milan had just won a Serie A title. It was an expectation that this player might be one of those missing pieces to take the club to even a further up level. So the pressure was significantly different joining a Serie A winning team and playing as an attacking player. A lot of people have a lot of things to say about Rafael Leao. He plays this way, he plays that way. We don't like the way he plays. But at the end of the day, 50 matches that he played last season, he had 25 goal contributions. And what I'm trying to say with that is that a lot of the times in the fans' eyes, attackers are statistically driven performers. If you see certain stats, you're going to have certain opinions. With the Ketelaere, he had 30 plus appearances and only 1 assist to show for them. As I've already talked about in previous videos, the closest player to compare with Jashari is Ismail Benacer. And we mostly looked at Benacer from a standpoint of how he links up the play, how he connects Milan's midfield or the back line to the front line. We didn't really look at how many goals did he score in this game or how many assists did he get. So I think the pressure that is going to be on Jashari is not going to be as statistically driven. So he might be able to sort of maybe even get away with a few bad performances, because that midfield is going to also have the experience of Samuele Ricci, the 1-year experience that Yunus Musa has gotten, the wealth of world-class level experience that Luka Modric is going to bring in. So I feel like because Jashari doesn't have the risk of being exposed too fast, he might be able to play with a little bit more peace and a little bit more comfort and slowly build his time with the club than to 5 games in, no goals, no assists, oh, this is a bad signing already. Because that is pretty much how people started to look at Charles de Ketelaere. So Jashari to Milan, this is very much real. As long as the negotiations, even if slowly, keep progressing, it's just a matter of time before this gets done. Which brings us to the profile of Javi Guerra. Now let's listen to what Vito has to say about him.
There are not many updates for Javi Guerra because Milan must first close the sale of Musa and then they will look for another midfielder, Javi Guerra or Xhaka.
So if Jashari's profile was more in line with Ismail Benacer and not so in line with Reinders, I guess you could say that Javi Guerra might be a little bit closer to Reinders than he would be to Benacer or Musa. He seems to be a lot more in line with Reinders from an attacking standpoint. He does have a contract with Valencia till 2027, so there was always a bit of concern about what's going to happen with this move. Now, there had been some reporting that Javi Guerra had actually let Valencia know that he won't be signing a renewal. So it's possible that before the player enters his final contract year, next summer, and the offers start to become much more bleak because he only has 1 year left, Valencia might actually opt to maximize and cash out on the player right away. It was said, as I talked about in the past, that Spanish media at least reported this, that Valencia found Milan's opening bid to be offensive. De Rossoneri had made an offer about 16 million euros plus 4 million in bonuses, whereas his evaluation is said to be somewhere around that 25 million euro mark. Now, in the past, Daniele Longo, a pretty reputed Italian journalist, especially for Milan, he had talked about how the evaluation for Javi Guerra is probably around that 25 million euro mark. So a 16 million fixed plus potential 4 million in bonuses. Milan's clearly going under the evaluation even put on him by Italian journalists themselves. Even in the past, Yunus Musa was a player that was signed by Milan from Valencia. Milan at that point in time found a deal for the player at 22 million euros. And it's interesting that that's probably about the number where a deal could happen. But what actually makes it interesting is the fact that, as Vito already pointed out, these two players might be linked once again. It might be the departure of Yunus Musa that then facilitates not just from an economic standpoint, but also from a place in the squad standpoint. So if Yunus Musa leaves, if he goes, well, it doesn't seem like the Napoli move is going to happen at this point in time, especially with Anguissa staying. But if Musa moves away, goes to the Premier League, potentially teams that he's being linked with, then Milan would use that cash and use that empty spot left in their midfield to fill it in with Javi Guerra. So at this point in time, from the reporting that I'm hearing, I'm going to say that Javi to Milan, I would say it's definitely possible, but I do understand Vito's point in that if a player leaves, a midfield profile departs, that's when this player would come in. I see there to be no possibility that Milan's midfield stays the way that it is with Loftus-Cheek, with Musa, everybody in there, and Javi Guerra is also added on. Which brings us to the profile of Marco Asensio. And Vito was very clear about this one. That initial point that I made about Max Allegri wanting youth plus experience, Asensio is not necessarily a young player. He's 29 years old at this point in time, but he's still not 33, and he still brings a wealth of experience having played for some of the top clubs around Europe.
Asensio is a very important player. This year Milan is trying to increase the experience of the team, and he could be perfect for this. The last year he played little, true, but he scored 6 goals in only 12 games with Aston Villa, and Modric could be important for his decision. We will see if Milan will make a concrete attempt in the coming hours.
And I have to point out that it feels like Asensio is one of those players that I talk about in almost every transfer window for the last maybe 2-3 years. Every time a profile is made on the player and nothing really comes out of it. I'm not quite sure if this year is going to be any different, but news started to break out that this is a player that Milan has once again been pitched by George Mendes, the agent of Asensio, the same agent who's also pitched Joao Felix to Milan, the coach Sergio Conceição to Milan, has now come back and said, hey, what about Marco Asensio? You guys want to take him on too? The part that we have to remember about the player that, he plays for PSG, but last season he wasn't one of the Champions League winners per se with the club because he played part of his season with PSG and the other part with Aston Villa. So throughout the course of the season, he had, scored about 10 goals, assisted 5 times, but Villa decided not to pick up the option to buy the player. And I think that's where we have to, make these considerations about Asensio, is that He's, if we listen to what Iglitari had talked about in that press conference, maybe about a week ago, that Milan is looking to make an addition in attack alongside Santi Jimenez, but a player that offers you out and out goals, a clear cut goal scorer, not somebody who necessarily drops deep and helps out in the build up play. No, a poacher, a true goal scorer. And when you look at that Asensio profile, you don't really get that sense. He's a player who can play on the wings. He can play as a central attacking midfielder, play as a striker. Obviously, he's not coming on as a true center forward like a Pippo Inzaghi. So making that type of a splash on a profile like this, especially when a profile like this has a salary of 14 million euros. I mean, we're looking at Dusan Vlahovic and saying, well, 12 million, that's too much. His salary is way too high. He has to certainly take a pay cut. What would we say looking at Asensio's salary of 14 million, 2 million more than him? But there have been reports that have come out, not as much, I would say, from Italian journalists. They've come more from French journalists. L'Equipe had a journalist that came out and said that Milan have open talks with PSG at this point in time. Di Marzio denies that talks have taken place. But you could see a little bit of everything in this. You have an attacking player who has experience. He could help out Max Allegri. You also have a player who's entering a World Cup season. At the end of this season, there's going to be a World Cup, and he wants that consistent play time with his club. It has been said that Luis Enrique has said to him that he's not going to get consistent play time at PSG. That's why he was loaned out to Aston Villa. So from Allegri's standpoint, you get an experienced attacker. From the player's standpoint, you get maybe more play time compared to what you're going to get at your club. But then when you look at his salary, the entire deal collapses. So at this point in time, when it comes to Asensio's potential move to Milan, seeing all the elements as a whole, I'm going to stamp this as more of a rumor. No Italian journalist till the time of putting this video together, has confirmed this report. Vito is very clear in what he's saying. This is a player that would fit the profile of Allegri. He's not confirming that the deal is getting done. Di Marzio has explicitly come out and said there are no negotiations happening. I think this is a rumor that is coming more from French media and less so coming from Italian media as a realistic profile that Milan is chasing. Now let's take a little bit of a quick look at some of the attacking profiles that Milan is being linked to. One of the players that we've talked about extensively this summer transfer window is Dusan Vlahovic. Vlahovic is having drama, straight up drama with Juventus at this point in time. Now, it was already being said that, with his final year of the contract, maybe a deal around 25 million could be done, but his salary was always a sticking point, still is, but man, some of the things that are unfolding between him and Juventus are, straight off out of a reality TV show. So firstly, Juventus went out and signed Jonathan David, the Canadian Jonathan David, on a free transfer, so pretty much a direct competition for Vlahovic. Vlahovic was then left on the bench for the match against Real Madrid, but a match that Real Madrid ended up winning and beating Juventus in. Vlahovic then goes on Jude Bellingham's Instagram page and likes a post about winning the match against his own team. He literally liked the post of a guy celebrating a win against his own club. Now, is that a profile as a football fan? Is that a player you even want on your team? Somebody who creates that much chaos? I guess you guys let me know in the comment section, but the facts of the matter still don't change. The 25 million price tag is something that Milan can definitely pay. The past experience with Max Allegri is definitely a big asset, but that salary has to be reduced. Is that going to happen? Is someone going to be willing to maybe pay for part of the salary? Could it be possible that there's a loan deal of some type that is done where, Juventus pays for a portion of his salary and Milan pays for the remainder because they want those 12 million off their books. So they might lose him for free and have to pay 12 million to him after signing Jonathan David, or they come up with a deal where maybe he reduces his salary for the season, Juventus pays for part of it, and Milan pays for the remainder of it. It's very difficult to say because the player only has 1 year left on his contract, but he still seems to be arguably the number one profile that Milan has been linked with. So Vlahovic to Milan still has to be stamped as possible. In the last episode, I stamped it as unlikely. This time I'm going with possible because of the arrival of Jonathan David to Juventus, which tells me that Vlahovic's days there are very likely numbered. Then there's a profile of Mateo Retegui, the player who scored the most goals in the league last season, won the Capocannonieri, but somehow it is being reported by Calciomercato that this is a player that is not unsellable for Atalanta because they are somehow aware of how the market dynamics work, and if they can get a good price on the player, player, then they would also be open to the idea of letting him go. La Gazzetta dello Sport came out and said that Milan evaluates the player around that 40 million euro mark. Other news outlets have reported that Atalanta evaluate him around that 50 million euro mark. Some have even said that Atalanta values him around 50 to 60 million euros. But there have been some reports that there is a club from Saudi Arabia that has at least expressed interest in Retegui, closer to that price tag of what Atalanta would like, which is around that 50 million euro mark. So in order to get this player, Milan would have to pay that much. I have some serious doubts that the club would do that. Atalanta, even at 40 million, would make quite a bit of money on the player. They bought him last summer for 20 million from Genoa, somewhere around 22 million euros. They could sell him around 40 to 50 million euros. So either way, they're going to make, a sizable profit on the player. But you have to say that Retegui to Milan it's like a dream profile. You find a fairly young, experienced Italian, out-and-out true center forward who just won the Capocannoniere. That would be a dream signing for everybody at Milan. So at this point in time, meeting price tags of 50, 60 million euros, this I can't see happening. If a deal can be found around 40 million, I guess it could happen. But right now I'm going to have to stamp this as unlikely. I think with the numbers involved, this just seems to be a bit more of a fantasy. And finally, it's the profile of Gianluca Scamacca. Once again, just like Marco Asensio, a player that I seem to talk about every summer transfer window for some reason, his profile has come back up again. And similar problems still exist with Scamacca. Now, his valuation would be much closer to what Milan would want to pay, which is about 20 to 25 million. But the biggest roadblock with this player is the fact that he had a very bad injury last season. He only played one match. And if you're looking for a profile that will offer you guaranteed goals, like the management has said, in order to get guaranteed goals, you need guaranteed appearances, guaranteed availability of the player. And the fact that he was injured all of last season, played one match, and that's how fragile he may potentially be, could even have a relapse of the injury, he might not even be available to you anymore. So where are you going to get the guaranteed goals from? So it's Scamacca, just with the logistics and how his previous season panned out and what Milan is looking for, I just don't think this is a fit. And I'm going to stamp this one as unlikely. I think because he's Italian, he's a striker, he's within that 20 to 25 million range, it is a profile that could work, but only if he had scored, maybe 13 to 18 goals last season and was available to his club. So his move to Milan, I'm going to stamp it as unlikely. And there you have it, Milanisti. Those are some of the profiles we want to take a look at today. Samuele Ricci's move to Milan is now done. That's your first signing for the summer transfer window. How do you guys feel about that? Make sure to let me know in the comment section. Which of the profiles we talked about today do you think is going to be the second signing for Milan's transfer window? Make sure to let me know in the comment section, and also make sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at FootballKush. You all can connect with me directly there. And as always, from my side, Forza Milan. Grazie mille. Ciao tutti.